All right, we are now up to our third joint communities focus. And again, this is from the CEB's decision of where we're going to focus our combined attention for 2008. And this last committee focus is emerging technology. So the topic is going to be new realities in the emerging tech ecosystem. And just as tech changes constantly around us, so does our industry and the ways in which leaders have to leverage or get to leverage technology to build successful businesses. In this eye-opening session, we're going to examine some of the key drivers shaping today's changing tech landscape and their significant impact on business of technology today and tomorrow. So I would like to introduce our moderator for today, Michael Haynes. Michael is Microsoft's Director of Worldwide Partner Incentives, Strategy, and Program Design. Specifically, he leads the partner incentive design for open license, CSP, and Surface incentives. In this role, he is responsible for defining strategy to evolve the partner incentive programs that will deliver optimal partner sales, market results, and motivate partners to evolve their organizations to take advantage of this amazing shift to the cloud. So, and next on our panel, I would like to introduce Meredith Karam. Meredith is the RVP with AT&T Partner Solutions. She's responsible for identifying and launching new partners to drive profitable growth for AT&T Partner Solutions. In addition to attracting new customers, Meredith helps mid-market and acquisition wholesales and solution providers grow their sales and innovate with AT&T's products and services. So welcome, Meredith. All right, next up, we have Joseph Hodges. Joseph is an entrepreneur who has created, grown, and sold companies across the United States. He is the founder and president of AmeriClaim Solutions. His most recent accomplishment is a new venture called Care Valet. And this is aimed at solving the consumer healthcare access maze. So thank you, welcome. And next up, we have Tony Francisco, a serial entrepreneur born in San Francisco, raised in the heart of the Silicon Valley. Tony is passionate about deconstructing business concepts and building them into profitable business models through technology, automation, and scalability. Cloud Plus, his latest endeavor, founded in 2003, started as the fourth largest hosted Microsoft Exchange offering in the world and evolved into the industry first, a true hosted services distribution platform. So give a big welcome for everybody here.
And we thank you for that. No. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to our session. So I'm going to start off with a couple slides because as we saw this morning in our keynote to kick off this two-day event, some staggering progress with emerging technologies. And then right after that, we kicked off our new community around emerging technologies and had tremendous audience participation. It is a phenomenal opportunity. I just want to tee up just a couple items just to show, and this is kind of the old Gartner analyst in me. I can't avoid not showing a couple of slides that show some numbers. But if you have any doubt about the opportunity that these three panelists are going to talk about here for the next hour, it starts with thinking about some of these things that we thought just a couple of years ago were too far out on the horizon, and things like cloud and mobility and that's for another day. I'm not sure I'm going to do that. Just a few years ago, that's the way we were thinking. Now think about it. The way we shop and everything else is totally different. The way retailers have had to shift their business in order to serve us as consumers because of that emerging technology has changed a lot. The apps have won. Interesting piece of data here that smartphone apps are now 60% of all online spend in the US, and it's going up quickly. Now, a few years ago, who would have thought that? But think about the way you shop now. And those things that just a few years ago looked like long play emerging technologies very rapidly have become, big changes in the way we even live and work and shop and that sort of thing. The opportunity is huge. Let's look at AI for just a second. In 2016, just a couple of years ago, it was about a $1.4 billion opportunity. By 2025, the prediction is around $60 billion. And 67% of organizations globally have already adopted or are adopting it. So this isn't emerging, it's actually happening, and the opportunity is phenomenal. That's opportunity for you guys if you get your solutions right around it, right? Then you look at cognitive systems and AI, and it's going to drive to close to 50 billion in 2020. These are all numbers with big B's behind them. And that's a beautiful opportunity for all of us. And a lot of the key industries are industries you guys are selling to and have been for years and years and years. Finally, one thing on the downside that we have to remember about this is it takes a lot of transformation. And we'll talk about that a little bit in the panel discussion today. You got this huge opportunity around technology and technology shifts over the next few years. However, not everyone's going to make it. Over half the companies in the Fortune 500 since 2000 are gone. Now, some of that is M&A activity, but some of it is just they didn't adopt to disruption. A few years ago, when I was at Gartner, I made a prediction. You know how Gartner does those Gartner predicts things. And I made a prediction that within 2 years, over a third of the channel would be out of business. Then I got hired by Microsoft, but I went back and checked with some of my sources right after that. And I asked them, so you guys keep track of this, like the disties and that sort of thing. And I said, how did we do this? They said, your prediction was short, it was 40%. So the other key is there's lots of opportunity here, but you need to transform and figure out how to take advantage of it so you're still relevant to your clients and providing value in new ways. And we'll talk about that a bit today. So let's kick it off. So I'm going to do this format kind of focusing on a handful of what we have seen in the last few months as we put together our emerging technologies community as key technologies. And we'll just kind of explore them and what the opportunity and what these three esteemed folks think about it. I'm going to start, Meredith, with you, and I'm going to start with 5G. 5G is talked about a lot. There's a lot of buzz about it. AT&T has announced some of their plans around it. But really, how do you see it? And what is the opportunity? And what should we be thinking about going forward around 5G?
Thank you, Mike. Great question. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
So from an AT&T perspective, we expect that 5G technology is really going to help customers connect to more data devices faster. It's also going to help enable lower latency, increase battery life, and also help manage more data. So when you think about the surge of video today and the demand of video on mobile networks, it just continues to accelerate. So I guess it was like the past decade, I was pulling some numbers. We've seen over 250,000% growth in data on our network. And when you think about 5G, it's so much more than speed. It's really about the connected customer experience. So you think about the time that it takes you when you click play on a video, from the time it actually starts, or when you click on a web link, and the time it actually takes to load. That's speed, but there's also a connected customer experience that's there. You mentioned, Mike, the plans that we've announced. So we are trialing today in over 20 metro areas for 5G, and we really do believe this is our network of the future. Chicago is one of those trial cities. So for those of y'all Chicagoans, I don't know what you call each other, Chicagans? Anybody know? Anyway, so congratulations. Chicago's the first test pilot city for us, and we have hundreds planned to roll out to as well.
So as a follow-up, for this audience and all the solution providers out there of different types, do you think 5G is going to be the new competitive edge for them, and why?
Well, so I have a lot of thoughts. I would tell you that in our industry, we're always going to have an immense amount of competition. And that's really good for our customers and for the business community. What it also does, though, is it brings new elements and new variables to life, such as, the ability to optimize the customer experience on the network. And so we feel like that we're going to continue to be at the forefront and lead on 5G and drive, the competitive edge there, just like we've done so far in collaboration with setting what the 5G standards are today.
And how do you see that in relation to big data? Because all of a sudden now you've got the kind of speeds in a wireless environment that can take advantage of that.
Yeah, so automation is key to everything that AT&T does as we continue to move towards being more data powered. And so data helps advance all of that. When you're talking about 5G, when you're talking about building artificial intelligence solutions like you kicked off with. And so, without data, what good is anything to us? And so you're going to continue to see AI play a big piece in that, but you can't do any of it without data.
So, Tony, I'm going to come over and get a different perspective from you on this. And that's in partnership. So, you've put together lots of companies. You've had to do a lot of partnerships with other companies to make it real. And when you think about 5G, and then we'll carry this conversation into some of the other technologies, how can partnerships benefit from this, and how should the audience think about that when it comes to these kinds of emerging technologies like this?
I would like to preface this with understanding where we are today is one perspective, but it's incredibly important, if not critical, to understand where we came from. And if we remember the days of analog, for the people out there that remember analog cell phone, having any type of data transmitted on analog was just brutal. Can you imagine, just put yourself in that position, if everything was connected at all times, what you could do with that? And that's where we are today. So now we're going to improve that. And we're on the precipice of something that's amazing. It's not a matter of just speed, as Meredith said. It's truly the customer experience, the end user experience of being able to do anything from anywhere at any time at almost any speed. And that is a very difficult thing to quantify. So as far as how do we monetize this? How does this make sense to partners? How do we make money on this? I challenge that if you can think of a problem, there's nothing that will stop you or prevent you from making a solution to that problem, because 5G or the transport of that data, the connectivity of that data, of that person, that end user, to whatever the resolution is readily available. It's going to be right there. So it is the future, but being able to articulate it does everything all the time doesn't sound as good as it actually is. But if you can put yourself back in the mindset of the analog days, it helps you understand where we are today and how open the future is for us.
So let's now move off of 5G onto Internet of Things, or IoT. It's interesting. I remember being at a Cisco conference, and I can't remember whether it was 2002, 2003, somewhere in there, where John Chambers coined that phrase. And I was I was an analyst there, I was keynoting that event, and I was riding up in the elevator with him, and he gave me a challenge. And he said, come back to me and give me the 3 or 4 things that you think will be immediate opportunities in the channel. Talk about a question that gets you thinking when the term was just coined literally that morning, right? But here we are, some almost 15 years later, and IoT is now still being talked about as, quote, an emerging technology, even though we're seeing tons of applications. Tony, I'm going to stay with you for a minute, because more companies than ever are now expressing an interest in this, that they understand IoT. But talk about the explosion of the connections, because you were just talking about that in relation to 5G. Now talk about the explosion of connections as IoT goes from kind of emerging to almost mainstream kind of applications.
Absolutely, and not to continue, Meredith, just stay out of my conversation here in all of this. Well, it's because the connectivity is a critical ingredient, and so the one thing that's interesting that you pointed to, Mike, was that you talked about this so long ago, and IoT is not a thing. It's not an event, it's a process. And IoT is anything. It's your refrigerator talking to you about something you're running out of. It's your mobile device talking to your sprinkler system. It's your an amazing app that talks to all of your doctors and your medical facilities at any point in time for any reason, especially when you actually need them. And these are, at any level, is IoT. So the question is, who is going to take X and turn it into something that is now considered, oh, we just internet enabled this or made it connected in a smart city style atmosphere. Is it actually smart, as the speaker spoke about this morning? Not really. It's just connected. It's wired. But it's a process, and that process is never ending. It's like talking about, well, we heard about evolution is a new and up and coming thing. It's ongoing forever. And as for those of you in the industry who have been doing this seeing for decades, the evolution is now accelerating, and it's accelerating at a rate that is almost difficult to describe. Because now, before it was managed print, managed print, maybe a hosted server that does email, maybe, if you guys are familiar with that. And that was the big thing, but it's constantly evolving. So now the question is, what problems can be identified by those with customers that you can create a connectivity to something else to solve a problem? Therein, it lies under that IoT umbrella. So if we talk about, and I hate to be so vague about it because I would love to give you the magical, oh, this is the Internet of Things of the future. It's literally everyone in this room. So for any one of us to say that we have the map to the treasure, I think you're absolutely wrong, because someone else over there has a better map. Someone else over there has a better map. And in 2 weeks, the person over there is going to have the best map, and it's just going to continue to evolve. And that's the great thing. Yep. And Meredith, you're along for the ride the whole way with connectivity. So
Thanks, Tony.
So Joe, I'm going to switch to you. So again, when you think about harnessing data to predict and learn and make near real-time decisions using the IoT environment, how does this help businesses get a competitive advantage, and how can it help the solution providers in our industry think differently about how they can build solutions to do that?
Sure. So when I'm looking at the Internet of Things, I'm really looking at the Internet of me. And we've moved into this world, I mean, because of Moore's Law, we literally live in a consumerism world. And when we're talking to our consumers, whether they're an actual individual or they're an industry or an entity of some sort, we're really talking, what is my proximity to them? And so literally you have to look at the customer where they are. And when I say where they are, it's like, where are they right now? And what are their needs? What are they trying to accomplish? And what is it that we have to give them at that moment? So when I had to address our concerns in healthcare, I had to go out and take a look at what were the platforms, what was the availability to really give consumers what they needed to accomplish in healthcare. And what I found was, and it's not just in healthcare, but what I found was we have a lot of things that are at the consumer. And it's not based on what the consumer's experience would be or what it needs to be for them in that process. So we have a lot of things that we push at people, hoping they'll buy it, or hoping they'll find it, or hoping it's marketed well enough to them. But because we've moved into this new world that is more the proximity of me and more consumeristic, we're looking at what is that consumer's need at that moment. So what would I say from the perspective of you all is take a look at anything that you're selling, anything you're doing, anything that's been purchased, and look at that behavior, the utilization that is occurring with those members and how they're using it, how they're purchasing it, and so on. And this is really where data science plays such a key role. If you don't have a data scientist on staff or access on some level, it's something you probably want to consider, because this consumer behavior is really what's going to answer that question best for you and the markets that you're after.
So good. Yeah, Meredith, you want to add?
Oh, I just wanted to link this together for everybody really quick. So we started off with 5G, and then we were getting into IoT, and I think it's important for everyone to understand that while 5G is still in its inception, it is the network that will support all of these IoT devices that we're talking about here. And so you have to imagine us going from millions of devices to billions of devices and how you're going to do that.
Staggering as that seems, but everything is a device now. in this world. So now let's move a little bit to artificial intelligence, machine learning. Joe, I'm going to stay with you for a minute. So how is Caravelle seeing AI and machine learning and that opportunity? How do you guys view that?
Yeah, and that's such a really neat question. So does anybody remember Watson, the computer system from IBM, obviously? Yeah. And I think we all saw at least some version or the news on Jeopardy where Watson beat Ken Jennings, and I forget who the other guy was, but Ken Jennings was the bigger winner, I think. And Watson won the $1 million prize. What was neat about Watson at that point was here was this AI, and it was 5 servers that they actually had in the studio, and it wasn't connected to the internet. So it was using its capabilities that were literally just honed in on what those servers could provide. Well, Watson's capabilities are so much wider than that today, and it's hooked up to the internet, obviously. And you'll find Watson at Sloan Kettering, and the first use that Watson had at Sloan Kettering was for utilization management. And so what's developed out of that is Watson was also helping make decisions on lung cancer. And what they found was that Watson's decision-making process was so much cleaner and with better accuracy than the panel of physicians that they had. So now Watson sits on that panel of physicians and making those critical decisions. As I'm looking at that for Caravelle, Watson, what's really neat about that too, also has a bunch of APIs that now tag out. So we can link in to all of this data, all of this information that's been gathered over the last 5-7 years that it's been collected. And we're able to utilize this data to look at consumer behaviors and what their needs are, what the consumers are identifying, what their medical history is identifying are their needs, and what's the best way to link and source those care needs for a person from a predictive modeling perspective, as well as from what their future needs might look like and where we need to look at developing.
So the challenge for everybody here is to really think about how they can craft for the industries they participate in, for the clients they already have that are challenged with this stuff. How do they build on that? Meredith, I'll turn to you on the same topic. How is AT&T seeing AI and machine learning for your business, and how you think of it with the companies you serve, the partners you work with, and that sort of thing?
Yeah, so I would say that automation plays a large role in everything that AT&T does, especially our move towards being data powered, as we talked about a little bit ago. And specifically, we're evaluating the skills in which our employees have and what does the future of work look like, especially as we build out, the network evolution and the future of the network. And we created this robotic program where now we're actually assessing what our human employees are doing and how do we partner them up with machines and how do we train those machines to be predictive, to be dynamic, and to have them replace the work that's something you would call like a task that's repetitive, and how do we give higher logic work to our employees. And really, it's cool when you think about it, matching up a really high-skilled employee with a really powerful machine. Machines don't get sick. They don't take vacation days. They're not late because they ran out of mascara or their hair dryer broke, all of those kind of things. And so when you combine them together, it's powerful because then as an employee, you're able to do more work and you're able to do it faster and be more productive. So the robotics program is just one example where we're playing around with that internally right now.
Good, thanks. So let's turn to one of my favorite topics right now, because it's an exciting topic, but it's also a scary topic, is biometrics and security. It's interesting, Scott, at the keynote this morning, kind of talked a bit about the security challenges and questions were asked about, well, when will this not be an issue? And I don't know that the bad guys will ever keep it from being an issue. They'll always figure out ways to try to break through security issues, but there are ways that can combat it. And Tony, when we were talking a few weeks ago, as we were doing kind of the prep work amongst us to get ready for the panel, we were talking about this topic. And so, your perspective on biometrics and security, and how should solution providers be considering this emerging technology? Because it's big and it's so necessary, but there's so many issues around it.
I'm an uber geek, so for the real geeks out there, this to me, when he started talking about security and biometrics dual authentication and going from the RSA tokens, if you remember the key fobs back then. I get excited about that. This is my wheelhouse. So biometrics.
But we only have an hour.
I know. Right now I whip out my whiteboard. And, biometrics is nothing more than just an extension of the like I said, the RSA appliance that went to a key fob. Your thumb is your key fob for all intents and purposes. And if you're finding a customer that has a need for some type of compliancy, HIPAA, GLBA, Sarbanes-Oxley, SEC, whatever it may be, and they don't have another level of authentication, or they're not consolidating their usernames and passwords. A lot of the people out here in the MSP world are worrying about vendor management. You should be really focusing on identity management, because identity management, you're going to have floating licenses out there, different usernames and passwords. You have John, Cindy, and Steve, and John takes another job or gets hit by a bus, and then you've got John's license out there that they're still being paid for, and no one's understanding that maybe John had a kind of a weak password, the account gets hacked, and then you're figuring out what the heck happened months, if not years later. That identity management is critical. A component of that is another level of authentication. Biometrics is just a natural evolution to what was previously considered just a key fob. So if you're not attacking that angle, it's low-hanging fruit. And I don't want to say that it's an emerging technology, but it's just an evolving technology that's readily available for all the MSPs out there.
Yeah, good. So one of the other topics that came up in the community meeting today, was we were kicking it off, is drones as an emerging technology. And we see them almost as a toy in some cases, because we started to see them where kids are flying their little drones around the house and that sort of thing. But it's becoming quite a serious technology. And Joe, I'll kind of turn it to you. What's the role of drones, and are they going to eventually replace all of us in some way?
I sure hope not. Yeah. All I know is every time I get one from my kid for Christmas, he breaks it within about 30 minutes. So it's, or some of his friends come over and do that for us. But, from how I would use a drone, I don't know yet from my business perspective, but I look at how it's being used out there. And obviously one of the examples that we're all familiar with is Amazon utilizing it for delivery. There was something that came across my desk last year that I was really fascinated by. And I don't know if you're familiar with Martine Rothblatt, but Martine Rothblatt was one of the founders of Sirius. Well, her daughter was very ill, so she decided to found a therapeutic company, or a pharmacy company, called United Therapeutics. And as this company became successful and she began looking at how can she better solve some of the healthcare problems of the world, she realized that transplantation and human transplant tissue is very difficult, and people get stuck on these waiting lists. So she invested in pig farms around the United States, and has been harvesting pig tracheas, and is now working on, can we actually harvest and clean the lungs, because it's the closest thing to a human lung. Well, in the process of doing this, it was announced that she bought a drone company out of China. And everybody's like, why does she need a drone company? Well, getting a transplanted organ to a medical facility quickly enough, you can't necessarily always put it in a car because you get caught in traffic. You can't hire a helicopter, that's really expensive. So she bought a very well-designed drone company in order to move these transplanted tissues and organs as she needed to, as quickly as possible. And I thought it was really fascinating, and someone thinking outside of the box. So when I hear that, it starts making me think, all right, what aren't we using drones for that could be done better? And we all see the Facebook posts with the people, oh, somebody just got transported in China from their building over to another building. And that's pretty exciting. I'm worried about being decapitated if that thing tries to land near me. But, when we start looking at, there's so many different opportunities to be looking at, and we're really just at the cusp of what that technology can actually do for us.
There's a good article in this season, I don't know how you guys call it, but of the CompTIA world. And if you look at that, there's a good article with Arlen Sorensen. A lot of you probably know Arlen. I've known him for many, many years, and we're of similar age, and we both grew up farmers, and so I love talking to him more about farming than I do technology sometimes. But good article in there I'd encourage you to read, because Arlen's using drones on his massive farm and helping farmers all over the country do that, in being able to literally pinpoint if there's a problem with like 10 acres of a 100-acre field with, say, insects or something like that, and he needs to throw something on that, he's using drones for that. So every industry that you sell to and think of where there is an opportunity where there's a process that's either dangerous or challenging, or it can be pinpointed better, or you don't have to drive 20 miles out to your other farm to do it. You can literally send a drone in Arlen's case. Be creative and think about that. There's lots of applications for this stuff if you just step back for a half an hour with no interruptions and just brainstorm around your clients and what can possibly be done, and then think of how you can either buy a company or partner to do something like that. Tons of opportunity. Now let's move to a really fun topic. Virtual reality and augmented reality. Oh my gosh. This is one of the more exciting opportunities. We are spending a fortune at Microsoft on this in R&D right now. And it's not just HoloLens. There's a lot more that's going on, because this is a fascinating way, and we're starting to actually have application in the areas of engineering and training and that sort of thing. So I'm going to kind of ask the panel. Meredith, I'll start with you, but I'd like to get all of your inputs on just how you see the impact of augmented reality and virtual reality, and how should these solution providers and how should the channel in general just think about using these technologies as they really advance to do some pretty cool things with. And how are you guys seeing it at AT&T?
I'm going to pass this microphone as soon as I can, but I have one example to share that's very relevant. So from an AT&T perspective, we have thousands of field technicians that go out to install and repair services. We were just talking about this last night, I think. And we're trying to get more females. And you know, when you think about it as a female in a bucket truck, the first thing I think about is, where am I going to put my handbag? You know, whereas when a male walks out of the house, you know, you just grab your wallet, your keys, your phone, you're kind of good to go. And then, and so when you think about designing jobs for women and how do you get more females into a male-dominated type of world, the best way to show them what the job is like, other than doing a ride-along day in a truck, is to connect them with content, you know, using VR. And so we've been doing that a lot to show examples of when you go out to a pedestal and you take the lid off and there's a rattlesnake around it, like, what do? You know, after you freak out, you know, you probably kill it or something, I don't know. That part wasn't in the, you know, video series that I saw. But you know, helping with workforce diversity and getting people to think differently about jobs than when you just see like a cone popped on a curb. We've been using VR a lot to get inside there. And I'll pass now to Tony or Joe.
Joe, we'll just come this way.
Sure. Has anyone heard of a company called Magic Leap? Take a look. Look it up on your phone, magicleap.com. They're a company out of Florida, and they've really created the most amazing virtual reality worlds, and they've got all of these applications they're using it for now. I can't name one of them, but I'm so fascinated by this company and what they can do. But if you go on there and you take a look at the videos of what they're able to create, they literally take an image of your living room, and you're looking through whatever tool you're using, if it's Oculus or whatever the tool is, and then there's another being right there for you, or a window into another world that you can step into. And it creates all of these amazing opportunities. And when I always look at things like that, I always look at them from the mental health perspective, and how do we recreate an image or a traumatic event or something around there that's soothing and calm that will help someone make a step or a leap or improve their condition in some capacity. But Magic Leap is massively fascinating. And when Tony and I were talking, I don't know, am I going to steal your thunder now with it? We were talking about it last night, and as we were looking at that video, Tony goes, wait, and he pulls up his phone, and he pulls up the AHA video with Take On Me. And it was exactly the video example that we were looking at, but done by AHA back in the 80s. And I was like, they were way ahead of the curve. They should have leveraged that technology, and really, or whoever created their video should have. And but that's all I got.
So Tony, how do you see it? You want to pass the mic? Because you have a different perspective, I think, on this whole market.
I will drag you all into the technical tar pit so quickly, and that I was told very specifically not to. So I'm going to bring this at at the common folk language. So
It
when you're
was real
taking
tempting,
pictures,
by the way,
you're talking to
not
me.
to put a big poster board up here that he could get up and
horrible.
start drawing.
I need a whiteboard. So when you're taking your Instagram photos and they put little bunny ears on you, does anyone here do that? No? Anyone have kids? You have kids?
Yeah.
I do it all the time. I'm just sitting there. Me and my kids just sit there and laugh all the time playing. But that augmented reality is something that we can all relate to. And there's so many different ways that could have been played out. I would love all of you to have augmented reality. So Joe and I, because we plan to look alike, but apparently you mismatched.
It's a nice suit.
He chose this for me, by the way. Augmented reality can be used in so many ways, and I have a very futuristic, the high beam approach, as the morning speakers talked about, where I see it could be used, through the levels that we can all envision, such as, surgery, training, perfect example, furniture decoration in augmented reality versus virtual reality. If you guys haven't used augmented reality for purchasing furniture, it's fascinating. It's awesome. We've got a whole new living room set from that. And there's more realistic scenarios that can be used today. But then the question is, how does that apply to everyone in this audience? Are you actually creating your augmented reality application, and how are you monetizing that? How does that apply to your customer base? AT&T has figured it out, which is awesome. And can everyone here do that? And I would challenge that a lot of people, if not a majority, if not all of the people here, it doesn't really resonate because we don't have the skill sets to create an application of that magnitude. So I don't think it's here yet. I absolutely classify it as an emerging technology because at some point someone will say, hey, rather than get out and do X, maybe I can create an application because all my customers have this X need, and we can show them, put that visual representation of what it would actually look like without having to build a mock-up. We can do it digitally. So that's on the forefront, and I don't know how to translate that well to this audience, but it's clearly there. I stick to the bunny ears. It works well.
Well, it's a challenging one for the point that you just made, Tony, in that most solution providers in our industry have been providing specific types of services and solutions to their customers for years, and this sort of thing requires expertise that probably is not inherent in their companies. But the key is to look at industries, and the industries that are early adopters of this. And it's not hard to look at a Gartner hype cycle and find that out and see that. And then think, if you're really good on that in that industry, how can you find the developers around this where you have a really good application, solution, whatever it is, that could be enhanced by AR or VR, and go find somebody then that can work with you to just enhance that opportunity. This is a tremendous time for partner-to-partner collaboration in our industry, I think. Let's move to blockchain as a last technology here to explore a bit. Chomping at the bit to talk about blockchain here.
Can I have both?
So this, everyone in the room has probably read a bit about blockchain, and if I asked for definitions, I would probably get as many definitions as there are people in the room. And I would venture to guess that very few would hit on the real 2 or 3 core technologies that make up blockchain, because it is an emerging thing, and unless you deal in something that's using blockchain right now, it's not something you're probably working on, but it will be, because it's applicable way beyond the Bitcoins of the world. So, Tony, I'll kick it over to you to talk a little bit about when you think it'll have a more general impact and what you see as the impacts.
First things first, I want to define blockchain. And is anyone here, and just be honest, I'm asking for you to raise your hands. Who here knows what blockchain, let me rephrase that, who here does not know what blockchain is? Just call it out. Okay, good, I'm addressing a handful of people. So blockchain is a journaling system. It's an auditable platform, for lack of a better term. And then the application rests on top of that. So when you're talking about, I'm going to design blockchain for X, you're actually working on the application. That's going to rest on top of blockchain for the distributed validation and the authentication that goes out there. So the point I'm trying to make is there's two components. I just put 5 people to sleep, I know it. Sorry. There's 2 ingredients that are absolutely critical to the conversation. There's the blockchain platform, and you can go buy, if you don't want to develop your own specific blockchain for your specific app, you can go buy vanilla, generic, maybe a little bit augmented blockchain formats from somebody who designed it that you can twist it to meet your application. Or you can design the application and then design the blockchain platform on top of that. It's a big deal because the application is still the application. And blockchain just happens to be the validation process that distributes this application and validates it to whoever you're doing the exchange with. So we're all talking about right now the same thing we've always been talking about. What is the solution? What is the application that you're creating? And how can it be carried on top of the blockchain platform to be agnostic to a single point of entry? It's actually a general ledger, so everybody can authenticate it. Everybody can make it part of the collective. So that's my interpretation of the definition of blockchain. What is the next? Voting, any type of transaction, monetary transactions are the easy one to understand because that's where you're trading something for something, purchasing something, giving something, voting for something, maybe tests.
I like to think of it as like exchanges at scale.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's the receipt. It's almost an anonymous exchange that's absolutely, completely auditable from A to Z infinitely. And so that's what blockchain is. Yeah. And you can put an app on there called Bitcoin, for example, and that's the application. And it resides on top of the blockchain auditing platform.
Yep. One of the challenges with blockchain is specifically because of some of the issues with Bitcoin is regulatory. And all of a sudden, some of the applications, and Bitcoin is the biggest that's called out, is a threat to existing industries. Let's face it, it's a threat. And governments yet don't have regulatory authority, and that drives governments nuts when they don't have regulatory authority. So just generally, any comments from any of you about what you see as how that gets dealt with and allows blockchain to continue to flourish despite that?
So I want to digest the question just a little bit. I have lots of thoughts around the regulatory environment in industry. And so when we're looking at blockchain specifically, essentially these things got created because consumers want to achieve something. And they want to achieve something, but the regulatory environment in so many industries is so massive that it really impedes that growth. It delays or prevents access to entry. And we look at industries, if you don't mind me carrying it just a little bit here, we look at industries that have gotten massively shifted because the need no longer met the consumers, or the consumer's need was no longer being met. So when we look at the transportation industry and Uber came about, it met the need of what the consumer needed. And so when we begin looking at other industries like healthcare, the consumer's needs are not yet being met out of that. So we know that this is an industry that's ripe for disruption when we're looking at that. And so blockchain was really, from the banking and the regulatory environment, people were like, we want control of our money outside of our own government so that we're not giving X% of it away. And we want to be able to travel the world freely and utilize our resources freely if we're outside of this country, and we want to be able to exchange and trade and have access to this. So when we're looking from a Bitcoin perspective, it's how do I have an unregulated but safe transactional environment to be able to use my hard-earned money without actually paying more taxes on that. And so when we're looking at that,
drives governments nuts.
And that drives governments nuts, of course. But when you're looking at any of this, I literally just go back to how industries are going to be disruptive. And I really believe that the financial industry, we are at the very beginning of some massive disruption that's going to occur, because as much as people say people aren't using Bitcoin or they're not using cryptocurrencies, so let's get it into the right term, they're not using cryptocurrencies, they are. I have friends that are not very smart people that are engaged with groups that are trading cryptocurrencies and doing really, really well.
I don't know if you want to go on record, though, because I think they're recording this, that your friends aren't smart.
I won't say their names, but they're being quite successful with that. And they're being taught how to do it smartly instead of looking at, online tools like Mt. Gox and all of these things. They're using their cryptocurrency wallets and using their massive two-level authentication tools to get into it, and then having all their transactions go through the blockchain to ensure it's a safe transaction. Now, you have to know a lot more than what I just even explained to do that successfully.
I think it's a great point, Joe, because I think the key is, and you hit on it, there's a couple of industries in finance and financial services is one that is just on the cusp of just massive innovation around this and disruption. And the beauty in all my years in this industry, the thing that I've always loved is big changes that lead to big disruption, because I used to be a solution provider for 20 some years, and I love that because that created a need in my customer. If I could find a way to fill it, it just created incremental business, and this is a great example. So as was pointed out this morning, let's take time to constantly be reading and learning and then thinking, how do I take this into my business? Look, we only have a few more minutes. We could sit here and talk about technology after technology after technology, but we don't have all night. So I'm going to wrap this and ask each of the panelists to just kind of give a minute or so of just closing thoughts around the emerging technologies and just how they see the channel working to make sure that they take advantage of it and don't become one of those companies that was on my last slide that is disrupted out of existence because you didn't anticipate. So, Meredith, I'll start with you.
Sure. So if the question is, should partners and solution providers and MSPs embrace emerging technologies? The answer is absolutely yes. The reason for that is because your customers are going to be expecting multiple platforms. And as new platforms arise, you need to adapt. With those new platforms come new opportunities. With the opportunities for technology come new growth. So if you're a for-profit company, you're looking to grow your business, emerging tech's the way to do it. It's that simple. And I do represent the partner solution side of AT&T, and so if anybody is looking to create a practice around mobile and IoT and 5G solutions and you don't know how to do it, we've got a great ecosystem and a good partner group that we can help you do that to make it easier.
Yep. Joe, what are your thoughts?
So what I would say is that obviously we need to connect with whoever we're doing business with. And if we're looking at emerging technologies, we need to look at the behavioral dynamics of who our audience is. And those behavioral dynamics need to define for us how we develop, how we build that relationship, and how we interact with them. And so if you're not measuring that, I think you're going to miss some really great opportunities because your customers are going to tell you now what they're looking for and what, not just what they need today, but what they need in the future. I always like to go back to the quote of Henry Ford that if he said, if I asked my customers what they needed, they would have told me a faster horse, but instead I gave them a car. So you need to be aware of what the emerging technologies are, greater so than what your audience is, because they're going to tell you they need a change. You need to tell them this is the change you're looking for.
Yep. Tony, thoughts?
When I founded Cloud Plus back in 2003, it was very specifically looking as far ahead as possible, which was the ease of consumption, hosted services, its immediacy, that gratification needs to be here and now. And that's great at a vendor level, but what happens at the user level? Pretty soon everyone's going to be logging in at 12 different interfaces to get metrics, and they don't want to do that. And that's why I created a platform for the identity management component, et cetera. The moral of the story is I am it's a crumb in the loaf of opportunity as new technology is coming or is on the horizon. It's bringing up, ironically, it's a 1 + 1 = 3, if not 5 scenario in regards to opportunities because it creates more complexity. And because of that complexity, this needs to be translated to a customer level. And that immediate gratification of click to provision, that's wonderful. But everyone here can make click to provision better based on the needs of the customer. And once you identify those needs and you wrap in the ease of use, ease of consumption, ease of management, you're creating technology as not just a product anymore. It's just actually just an accelerator to, and I believe the quote was, Don't sell the hole, or don't sell the drill bit, sell the hole. Find out the reason why they need the hole. Maybe you've got an entire process. They don't just need the drill bit anymore. It's a massive, massive engineering project that's beneficial to everyone. So at the end of the day, with technology, as it's progressing and evolving, the opportunities are, I believe, coming up even faster.
Good. So I'll give one closing thought, and then we'll wrap because we're near at time. This morning, we saw a really interesting methodology for assessing emerging technologies and figuring out where they are on a horizon, where they are in relation to the kinds of industries and customers you serve. Those kinds of tools are great because I think the biggest challenge most of us will have in this industry is the strategy piece. And seeing all these emerging technologies and seeing numbers like I showed, where you say, my gosh, what a huge white space there is around that. And then trying to boil the ocean and getting so fragmented that you don't do anything well and you lose sight. Instead of really recognizing where you are good, where you already have customer relationships and deep knowledge, and then using a methodology like we saw this morning to really assess and figure out where you can build some solutions around these emerging technologies that augment what you're already doing and allow you to provide even more value to your customers. At the end of the day, that's how we stay sustainable and make more money. So anyway, hopefully in the last 45 minutes to an hour, you picked up one or two ideas from the panelists that you can take back and actually take into some discussions back at the office with your leadership teams and kind of get you down the path of finding maybe your next solution. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the CompTIA team for allowing us to do this. And most importantly, I'd like to thank my panelists, Meredith and Joe and Tony, for the prep work they did in getting ready and participating. So thank you all. Appreciate it very much. Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Thank you very much. Thanks, Meredith. I'll turn it back over to the lovely Hillary.
Just for a moment. Lovely Meredith. No, you got it.